Yo guys, what is up? Here we are with another video, and today, as you can already tell, we are on another book, and I am so excited to be doing this now, and I might sound a little weird because I got a new mic, so I'm figuring this out along with you guys. But today's book, and probably till, say, April, is going to be Lost in the Pacific, 1942. Now, this is another scholastic book, and it is another World War II related book. But instead, this actually happened. So, I know I did not get the book. I'm not reading the book that I was talking about getting for a long time. Sadly, I did not receive the book that I was hoping to get. And, well, that's that. And I also sound a little weird because I got a cold. But I wanted to get this done because I want to record. So this is by Todd Olson. This is part of the Lost series. So if any of you guys know this book, this is a big series. This is just one of the books that I have. And without further ado, let's get into the first chapter. Okay, and before I do this, let me tell you the names of them. Actually, no, never mind. We're going to be reading the prologue today. That's a long prologue. The Pacific looked calm and inviting from 5,000 feet up, with the drone of 4 sturdy motors in Jim Whittaker's ear. But he had no desire to land a 15-ton, 4-engine plane down there. To B-17 bomber plunging from the sky, the ocean is as forgiving as a concrete wall. Yet, by 1:30 p.m. on October 21st, 1942, that was the only option left. Whittaker was the B-17's co-pilot. He and the rest of the crew were ferrying a VIP passenger on a top-secret mission deep into the war zone. They had completely missed Canton Island, the tiny speck in the great blue where they were supposed to refuel. Now they were flying in a giant square pattern, hoping to spot land. They took turns staring out the windows at the ocean below, mistaking clouds for islands. Island eyes. That's what the airmen called it. The surest sign that desperation had set in. The fact was they were lost, somewhere in the middle of the Pacific. They were nearly out of fuel, and the only landing strip they had was a vast tarmac of water. No one knew exactly how they had lost their way. Maybe the tailwinds were stronger than the weathermen had predicted. Maybe the compass had taken a hit when they nearly crashed, taking off in Hawaii. Either way, the navigator had finally given up trying to figure out where they were. He was a young guy named John DeAngelis, who had gotten married just 2 days before they were called away. Now he was probably wondering if he would ever see his wife again. "Do you fellows mind if I pray?" he shouted to the crew over the roar of the engines. Pray? Whittaker thought. How about keeping your mind on the task at hand, surviving an impact with the Pacific Ocean? Whittaker decided not to say a word. DeAngelis could swan dive into the ocean, it wouldn't matter. Their lives were in Bill Sherry's hands now, the 27-year-old pilot from Texas who sat next to Whittaker with the controls in his hands. Cherry and Whittaker began to talk strategy. It had been 10.5 months since the United States was drawn into World War II. At that time, plenty of bomber crews had ditched to the Pacific. Not one, as far as they could remember, had escaped without casualties. If the surface of the ocean were flat, it would be one thing. But today, the water rose and fell in treacherous swells. If you came in across the current, you would have to time it exactly right. Scrape the crest of a swell, and the nose would dip, sending the plane plummeting to the depths. Avoid one crest, you could ram the plane into the next one, shattering the entire craft into pieces in an instant. There was only one way to do it, Whittaker and Cherry agreed. Come in parallel to the swells, and set the plane down in the trough. That, of course, was easier said than done. The troughs were a moving target, and the wind blew across your flight path, making it hard to hold a line. Hitting a landing spot just right would still take perfect timing, expert piloting skills, and a whole lot of luck. While Sherry and Whittaker worked out a strategy, their top-secret passenger took charge of the crew behind them. And if luck really had to do anything with their fate, maybe he would tip the scales in their favor. He wasn't some desk-bound politician or stuffy diplomat. The VIP on board was none other than Eddie Rickenbacker. And Eddie Rickenbacker was a famous World War II pilot that had a ton of kills and was one of the very first American aces. So that'll help you follow along with this. For anyone who cared about flying, and for most everyone else, that was all the introduction he needed. Aside from Charles Lindbergh, he was the most famous pilot. He hadn't flown in combat since 1918, when World War I ended, but to millions of Americans, his heroics against the Germans were unforgettable. He had shot down more enemy aircraft than any other American pilot. Now Rickenbacker was a businessman, president of Eastern Airlines, but he had a well-known reputation for surviving close scrapes. He had first become famous as an auto racer, driving primitive cars at breakneck speeds. As a fighting pilot, he nearly had his plane shredded by German bullets several times. Then, in the spring of 1941, he had been a passenger on one of his own airlines when it crashed into a Georgia forest. Trapped in the wreckage, he managed to direct rescue efforts with broken ribs. Pages! 4. Oh, wait, never mind. Oops. Haha. That's the neck. Shattered elbow, a fractured skull, and an eyeball torn loose from his socket. He was in such bad shape that the famous radio commentator Walter Winchell reported his death on the air. When Rickenbacker heard it from his hospital bed, he picked up a water pitcher and threw it at the radio. A year and a half later, Rickenbacker still looked frail from the crash and walked with a cane. But now, with another crash looming, he seemed determined to survive one more time. Rickenbacker grabbed the youngest sergeant, Alex Kaczmarczyk. It's a Polish name, I think, and pried open the bottom hatch of the B-17's tail. Then he and K-Guy, I'm going to call him K-Guy, lightened the plane's load to save fuel and lessen the impact when they went down. Out went the cots, toolkits, blankets, empty thermos bottles, and luggage. Sacks full of high-priority mail sailed into the wind, soon to be a soggy, unreadable mess of good wishes that would never make it to the soldiers on the front lines. Sherry announced that he was starting his descent, and the water outside Whitaker's window looked more distinct by the second. Back in the radio compartment, the men had piled essential provisions by the hatch, a few bottles filled with water and coffee, emergency rations in a small metal box, a two-man raft rolled into a tight package. Once they landed, they might have as little as 30 seconds to get out before the plane went under, assuming they were still alive. The men stacked mattresses in position, patting the aft or rear side of the walls that separated the compartments of the plane. They all took their positions. 3 men, Mr. K, DeAngelis, and Rickenbacker's military escort, Colonel Hans Adamson, lay on the floor, braced against the mattresses. Rickenbacker sat near them, belted to a seat near the window. Johnny Bartek, the engineer, sat just behind the cockpit. The plane had 2 inflatable rafts packed into compartments on the outside of the nose. It would be Bartek's job to release them after they ditched. James Reynolds, the radio operator who went by Jim, sat at his desk in the center of the plane. He tapped out SOS after SOS, hoping that someone out there would register the location before they hit the water. There was nothing but silence from the other end. "How much longer?" someone asked. Not yet," Rickenbacker answered, peering out the window. In the cockpit, the altimeter showed that they were 500 feet above the sea. Sherry cut 2 of the engines to save fuel. Whitaker grabbed cushions from the seats behind them and stuffed them under their safety harnesses. "It sure has been swell knowing you, Bill," he said, offering his hand. Sherry gripped his co-pilot's hand for a second, and then said in his Texas drawl, "You know you're going to know me for a long time yet, Jim." In the back, someone asked again, "How much longer?" 50 feet, said Rickenbacker. Then right away, 30 feet. Sherry was staring into the waves, trying to pick a trough to aim for. The swells looked towering, twice the height of a man. 20 feet. They were coming at 90 miles an hour, but to Whitaker the plane seemed strangely still. The roar of the engines muffled. The whoosh of the wind muffled. The whoosh of the wind against the fuselage fainter than it should have been. And then there was the radio, whining its lonely signal into the sky. 10 feet. Bartek reached above them and loosened a set of bolts. The wind snatched the door of the cockpit escape hatch and sent it hurtling into the sea. A rush of air howled through the opening. "Cut it!" yelled Sherry. Whitaker pulled a switch, and all the electric power of the plane went dead. Sherry pulled back hard on the wheel, lifting the nose and ramming the tail into the water. Back in the radio compartment, the noise was deafening. Pieces of equipment that had been bolted down a moment ago flew through the cabin like shrapnel from a bomb. And then the belly of the plane hit the water. Whitaker exploded forward and the safety belt tried to slice him in half. Pressure filled his head. His eyes strained against their sockets. He couldn't see a thing. He began to lose consciousness. And then, just as suddenly as he began, the pressure released. The belt went slack against his chest. His vision returned. They had got from 90 miles an hour to a dead stop in less than 50 feet. He couldn't be sure who had survived and who had not. The Pacific Ocean was pouring fast into the plane, and no one in the big, broad world knew where they were. And that is the prologue. Now, I know that it probably seems silly that I only read the prologue, but I think that this will give people an opportunity to see what this book is going to be about. And if you're going to like it, leave a big thumbs up. And if you don't think this is your book, leave in the comments down below what you want me to read for you. So this book has 160 pages, and it has less than 160 pages. It is 152 pages, and it has only 15 chapters. So this will actually be a pretty quick book. So hopefully before the school season ends, I can get another book out, and that would be awesome. So, leave a big thumbs up, comment down below, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.